We're still in Mexico, and this session is all about Mexico, and that's one of the reasons why I put through to Jim was the question about mergers and acquisitions, because there are some excellent projects in Mexico that are held by junior mining companies that maybe there's some synergies going forward, and I plant that idea out there. It is something that I see as a possibility for moving a lot of the silver space in Mexico forward. And to be aware that Mexico is the #1 silver producer in the world, and some of the largest companies in the silver space are based in Mexico as well. I'll be making a few forward-looking statements, as we all do, and that's no different in this particular case. We're part of the Belcara group, and the Belcara group has 4 companies in the group right now. Orex is one of the founding companies. Within that group, you can see that these are some of the key people, and you'll have a speaker a little bit later on, is Stephen Cope, and Stephen will be talking about the Silver Viper as the 4th talk that's here, and they're in the Sonora area of Mexico. But we are the same group that made the advancements in Sweden in what's called the Barsele gold deposit in Sweden. I'll mention that briefly because of a connection. It used to be part of Orex, and we made the discovery of La Preciosa silver, which was a big silver deposit in the Mesa Central of Mexico that we sold to Coeur Mining at one point and made a lot of money for the investors. It was the right timing, and timing is often the key for a lot of the juniors in this space. But these are a few people. I would also like to mention here that Tatiana Alva has joined our team fairly recently. She's originally from Lima, Peru, where her first degree was, but she got her graduate degree at the University of British Columbia, totally bilingual, and she'll be working on field projects for us in Mexico. Our corporate structure, there are some parallels that you'll see with various companies, but we have a very strong institutional ownership. Eric Sprott has certainly been a big supporter of a lot of the precious metals companies here, but Ingalls & Snyder in New York, US Global out of Texas, the Contrarian Fund out of California, these are all groups that have invested in our group as well. And we do have, on the corporate side, Fresnillo Mining. They are the largest silver mining company in the world, a Mexican-based, London-listed mining company. They have a small position in our firm as well. It's because of joint ventures. In red there's a 2% net smelter return on a project in Sweden. Well, when we split the company into 2, the European assets were not really getting appreciated at the time, and the Mexican assets, so that somebody in Frankfurt, Germany would say, we love your Swedish project, but do they, what's going on in Mexico? And is it all about tequila and mariachi music? And then you go to California and they say, we love your Mexican projects, but do they have mining in Sweden? And so there was a disconnect. But as that project evolves, the Barsele, the NSR for that is still within the Orex portfolio. Barsele currently is a joint venture with Agnico Eagle. And so Agnico Eagle is the partner for Barsele Minerals on that asset. Management participates in all of these as well. We have about 15% of the company is held by management. Now, I'll mention 2 projects here, is one with Pan American Silver and the other one was with Fresnillo. We also have a small gold project in British Columbia that I'll be revisiting in the coming months. But we'll start with the Caneto project in Durango with Fresnillo. So the high plateau on the eastern side of the Sierra Madre Mountains is a place called the Mesa Central, and that belt also extends up into Chihuahua, which is where Jim was just talking about projects. And you'll have a talk from Defiance Silver, which is in Zacatecas, which is the state to the southeast. and that's the silver trend carries on through there. The town of Fresnillo is in Zacatecas. That's the biggest silver mining projects. Pan American Silver have La Colorada in northern part of Zacatecas. Our discovery at La Preciosa is in Durango. You can see where Caneto is, right in the heart of the state there. And Sandra project is the Pan American Silver Orex Minerals joint venture. So a lot of these really big silver systems exist through this area. This is what the countryside looks like here. You can see the village of Caneto de Comonfort. Our project goes another 8 kilometers beyond that pointy hill there that's called La Bufa. And from where I'm standing, it goes another 7 kilometers behind me. So it's a large land package in the mining camp of Caneto. Beautiful ranching country up in there. It's a window of the lower volcanic succession, the host rocks. As Jim mentioned for Kootenai's projects, is the system intact? Here we can go right to the contact between the upper and lower and put our hand on that time correlative zone. Different veins will have transitions of the grade from up in the upper levels where you'll have fluorite content and lower silver, and then you move into silver and gold, and then as you move into greater depths, you hit into base metal contributions that would be there. That's what we're seeing here as well. And we have about 45 to 50 different veins on the property. These veins, some of them have been explored quite well from their original discovery back 450 years ago. As Doug will be talking about in the next speaker spot for his project, it also has a long history. But it doesn't mean that it's been mined out by any means, because the technology changes over time. And what we found was a lot of the early mining from 200 years ago could only go to the level of the water tables. And so is the mineralization continue below that? The answer is definitely yes. So here we have 450 years of exploration was in this area. It's just about 100 kilometers north of the city of Durango, 4,800 hectares, so 11,000 plus acres of land. And if you think about history and say the movies like Indiana Jones, where you had the Cross of Coronado, Coronado actually stayed here, wintered in this particular valley many years ago during the conquistadors' days. So the history is quite fascinating for these. What I point out in red here is that we put out the first 43-101 report on this property. Give you an example of some of the veins that are on the property. Multiple veins on these systems. They're nearly all vertical or near vertical. But some of the depths that we're hitting here, you can hit mineralization that's relatively shallow, but you can also hit it down deep. I show Santo Nino down nearly 400 meters down, or the Durazno that's 400 meters down the drill hole, and we're still in the gold and silver zones. So any of the old mines that were only on the upper 70 or 80 meters, a lot of those structures just carry on. And so you sort out the structural positioning of these. This project is about half and half by value gold and silver. So metallurgical recovery is very strong. The 93% for 5 of the gold zones that were tested, with the 98% was one of the highest ones that was on the property. Silver still coming out after 96 hours, and you get into the 80% recoveries on silver. So this project, 106 drill holes, 38,000 meters on 12 targets. There are targets that have not yet been tested on the property. It's a beautiful place to work. It's absolutely excellent. This is what the material looks like in the shallow levels, where you do have the oxidation from surface, and you can see the gold and silver. This is the Loma Verde vein. There's gold and silver. That bottom assay there was 6.3 grams of gold with 142 grams of silver. So this is what the material looks like down deeper. So where you don't have the surface oxidation, you're looking at sulfides, and the geologists here will look at this and they'll say, what I see as boiling conditions, so the precipitation of mineralized systems coming out at this level is what's happening here, and you do have the base metals being introduced at this level. There's been no drilling done adjacent to this or down below this. This is the deepest hole on that part of the Santo Niño. And so you can get these high silver and gold hits as you're entering into the base metal zone beneath it. So 12 veins have been tested, 6 of them resource estimates. There have been enough drilling to get the initial resource estimate on the property. And this is what the first resource estimate comes out. If you want to quote it in gold equivalent, it's 538,000 ounces of gold, so half a million ounces of gold equivalent. If you want to think about it in terms of silver, we're at the 40 million ounces of silver equivalent. But it's roughly half and half gold and silver. So, as we move further to the north, we're on to Sandra. Pan American Silver and Orex Minerals are working on this particular project. From an environmental viewpoint, the green dot there is a dot that shows where our Barcellay, or the Balearis deposit is, and that Balearis deposit is the heart of the silver project there. Now, we don't have a lot of time for this one. I wanted to present more the Caneto story because that's the one that's going to be coming up into discussions with the next phase, because Fresnillo and Orex may be making that project available for mergers and acquisitions, and that comes right back to my question that I had for Jim earlier. But that's not the only asset that's in the Orex portfolio. Here is the other asset that we have, and to give you a sense of some of the grades that are there, there's 61 meters of 359 grams of silver at surface. So there's a lot to be discussed on the project. We're now entering, I guess, the time of the question period, so I've skipped through a lot of slides that we wouldn't be covering right now, but I'd open it up for questioning.
Great, thank you, Ben.
One thing I might mention, 4 companies here, all in Mexico. A really good way, if you're uncertain, just buy all 4, right? So put it all together, make that a package, and buy all 4 of them, and you'll cover yourself. Yep.
Sorry, part of my ignorance, this is probably something many of you already know, but earlier on, you had some of your silver and silver equivalent readings in red, and at first I thought they were just spikes, but some of the numbers are quite low. What's the difference between the red and the black font way earlier? Not here, but in the previous slides.
Okay. Yeah, it's usually just if it's more than 4 times whatever the cutoff is that they're using in the resource estimate, often we'll highlight it and put them in red rather than black. So for the Caneto resource estimate, we use the numbers from Fresnillo of what they think the mining costs would be, which was $74.15 US. That's what they said was the cost that they would use for mining this kind of a deposit. And so we were using it as working with the metallurgical recovery and the grade and the anticipated dilution for each individual vein, that each one of them would have a separate estimate of how that resource was done. And so that if the grade was more than 4 times of what was required for that vein, that's how they'd color code them. So.
Is that cutoff mining and milling?
Yeah, that was an all-in. That's a good number for you to know for these vein systems, vertical vein systems. Fresnillo has been mining these things for multiple decades, and that's the number that they are currently using for their mining costs. Call it $75 US, all in for working on one of these veins. So if you were doing an open pit, like your La Negra project, you'd certainly use a different cutoff grade that's there. Okay?
Great, thank you, Ben. I love the collaborative approach that you take with all your peers.
Good.
So,
And I see that Doug came in partway through. I introduce Defiance Silver will be the next topic that you have here, so I'm taking your role here. And Defiance Silver is the next state to the southeast, and they certainly have a very interesting project.